Welcome to Dear Art Producer, a podcast connecting the photography and video community with art producers. Drawing on her agency experience some years ago, photography agent Heather Elder penned an open letter to art producers discussing the finer points of working with one another. This podcast takes that idea and will introduce you to different art producers, share the stories of their diverse career paths, explore what it means to stay relevant, and examine industry topics such as marketing, estimating, directing, websites, and more.
Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today we welcome Director of Production and Business Development, Amy Shaw. Amy specializes in broadcast TV, digital, and content creation for luxury and beauty brands and is well-versed in the art of celebrity and social influencer talent. She has worked on prestigious brands such as Volkswagen, New Balance, and Carnival Cruise Lines, and many of those campaigns have won Lions, Clios, and Communication Arts Awards. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Heather. I'm so happy to be here.
I know. Gosh, you and I have known each other forever and rarely get to see each other, but every time I talk to you, I feel like we haven't skipped a beat.
I feel the same way, and I'm so excited to be part of this dynamic podcast and group that you're always developing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really great.
Where in the world am I calling you today?
So I am in Boston, Massachusetts today.
Oh my gosh, my daughter just went back to school the other day and she sent me a Snapchat with the, little temperature degree thing, and it was 19 degrees.
Yes.
Which I know is not awful. It could be worse, but my goodness, that was a big difference between San Francisco and Boston. A little bit of a shock for her when she returned.
Well, today actually is bright and sunny. It's a little bit warmer, so I actually think today is quite a nice day for your daughter. I hope she gets outside a little.
Blue skies make a difference, for sure.
Do.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to talk to you about what you've been up to, because before we started chatting, or before we started recording, we were chatting a little bit about what you were up to, and you mentioned that you were concentrating mostly on working with brands directly, and I think that's a really interesting part of what's happening in the industry right now. And I think a good place to start would be to kind of talk about your career path, because I feel like not all producers or art producers take the same path to their job. Obviously, none of us have studied this in college, and it's always kind of interesting to learn where someone started and where they ended up. And where you've ended up right now is a really interesting part of what's happening in our industry. So I'm kind of curious about how you got there.
Oh, thanks, Heather. Well, that's a really fun question. And, it's interesting because I actually started my career out as a magazine photo editor. So I didn't start in advertising. I did study art history in college, which I really loved. And I was always kind of passionate about the visual arts. And that was one of my main areas of interest just in general. And so after college, I started working as a photo editor, and then I was hired by the New York Times magazine group, where I got some experience working on their magazines as a photo editor, which was just wonderful. But eventually I wanted to move back to Boston to be sort of closer to family and friends. And when I came back, I realized that at the time there weren't really a lot of great magazines to work at. And I wanted to stay in this same lane of really interesting kind of visual communications, visual arts, media, in that bucket. And I found that in order to be in Boston, I was going to have to kind of make a little bit of a change. So that's when I started in advertising. And my first job in advertising was with Digitas, which at the time was privately owned. It was called Bronner Schlossberg Humphrey.
And, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Just to date myself a little bit.
I was just going to say, I probably am dating myself now too, but wow, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. And that was a really, really dynamic and fun place to work because Michael Bronner was a wonderful leader and really personable. And we just all kind of had a great time. And my art at the time, I was a junior art buyer. And so at the time we were called art buyers, and my whole team was wonderful. I actually had 2 friends on the team that also had gone to Colby College in Maine, where I went. They were both a little older than I was, but we had that sort of bond of sharing, of that shared experience. And, we worked on some wonderful clients and had a great time. So that was kind of how I entered the business, from the photo editor standpoint. And I know that, everyone comes to our business in a slightly different way, but that was kind of my entry point.
And how long were you at ad agencies as buyers before you went freelance and then started your own business?
Well, that's a good question, because there were a couple inflection points between when I was at Digitas and when I eventually went to Arnold, Boston. And I think there was at least 1 year where I did a lot of freelance work in between the 2 companies. And then again, when Volkswagen ended as a brand at Arnold and I got laid off, I had another opportunity to actually start working with a ton of celebrities. I spent a year shooting Brett Favre, the football player, down at his ranch in Mississippi for Wrangler jeans, both stills and TV. That TV commercial ran on ESPN for years. They used to just change the color of his T-shirt based on what team he was on. And then I shot Misha Barton for Keds in the UK. I shot Dale Earnhardt Jr. At the racetrack, also for Wrangler. So I had a year of kind of really focusing on more of some smaller fashion brands that had these celebrity endorsement elements to them. So I would say, all in all, I think it's probably about a 2-decade thing. I mean, maybe a little less than that. Maybe it was like 15 years, but between Digitas and then a larger chunk at Arnold. So I was at Arnold for 14 and a half years, as I said, with a break in between. And I, after a year, came back again. But so that's a pretty solid amount of time in terms of, being in the big kind of corporate advertising realm and really having an opportunity to work with so many folks like you and your, kind of top rated photographers, I would say best in class, that are doing the really groundbreaking creative work. And I was just so lucky because of the brands I worked on that I was able to engage a lot of not only photographers, but also artists. I mean, when I look back at all of the wonderful artists that I also was able to support, through these commercial projects, that was always very exciting to me and very much of a passion that, to be able to give real work to people who are artists is kind of a rare thing.
I can imagine, over the course of your career, how many amazing, talented people you've come in contact with and how, they've all influenced you and your decisions to stay in the industry. I'm sure it's the word I'm looking for. I'm sure you are inspired by all of them.
So inspired. And I have to say the creativity of the projects and the collaboration with really talented creative minds and spirits are, that's kind of what has kept me in the business and kept me engaged, because every time, I would come to the end of a project and then I would see down the line this possibility for the next, project that had so much creativity to it. And maybe it had creative challenges, or, maybe we were going to be shooting in kind of an out of the way or difficult to access place. There were always challenges that were exciting to me, that were driven by, creative most of the time, things that I would need to solve. And that really did keep me very engaged, and it kind of kept me on that path to continue in the business.
I have to interrupt you for a second and apologize for my 2 dogs that came into the room unexpectedly. I don't know if you hear them sneezing or not, but they are inviting me to play.
Oh.
They don't realize that I'm recording. So apologize to you and our listeners, but you need to imagine I'm in what
the other room too.
Okay, well, I thought I was in a quiet room, but if you want to, you can imagine that now I'm in a room with two golden retrievers who think that me sitting here with a microphone means that I want to play. So apologies for that.
I'm sure they're really low energy. My golden doodle is 2 rooms away too, but I tried to close 2 doors so that she would.
They don't pay attention to the closed door for sure. Well, look, getting back on track, and again, apologies for that. Given all of the talent that you've been surrounded by, given the amount of time that you've been in the industry, you've obviously seen some incredible changes happening at the agency level, at the brand level, even at the freelance level. Talk to us a little bit about those changes, and maybe kind of transition into talking about what you're doing now, because I know that you work mostly with brands directly at their, in their in-house agencies.
Yes, I mean the sort of agency world and our world in advertising has changed so much, and it's just one of those really funny things because I kind of feel like we've been saying things are changing a lot for years, so this isn't really a new theme, but I think that. There's so many challenges in today's market. I think that social media has driven the industry in a very different direction. And I think that, there's a lower barrier to entry for also with technology, like really good camera phones on iPhones and, other video equipment that's really user friendly. So, now kids can get on the technology and make a movie or a film or do a photo shoot and, sometimes with incredible results. So I think and at the same time, big agencies, are trying to figure out how to be faster and how to be more efficient. And so there's just, I think clients are wanting things at a very high quality, quickly and efficiently. And that's because they have to, compete on their side too. So that's what's required of them, so everyone's kind of needing to move faster in order to do well in their jobs.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and we were discussing the needs and what a client, a brand, values, and how that has changed over the years, and what that has done to the client agency relationship. And one thing that was coming up in the conversation, and again, this is very general, and this is not every single agency or every single brand this is happening to, but in a very general sense, what was being discussed was the idea that, agencies or clients and brands, need so much content now, more so than they ever did. If you think about the years ago, right? What did you call me for? Well, you'd fax me a layout of 3 images that you needed me to shoot, right? That would appear in a magazine or in Times Square or on a billboard somewhere or in a, Apple store or something, right? Well, then you would send me a shot list. It evolved into a spec sheet where I would now be shooting scenarios so that I would do a library of images for you because you needed a lot. Well, then we added motion to that. Then you expected me to understand maybe creating a short film or how does all of this work in social channels? And now it became a whole other dance for a photographer and director to have to understand all those elements that were needed, because what happened there was the brands were valuing content and they now had other choices. They had ad agencies, they had production companies, or they can bring the work in-house because they needed so much content and they needed it quickly. They aren't always looking to their ad agency to solve that problem. And would you agree to that? Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that assumption. And I do think that the need for content, especially fresh content all the time, because people now, being so immersed in social media, are used to seeing new images all the time, if not every day, and having that barrage of always something new. And I think just that change from going to a campaign, as you said, with like a layout with a few key visuals and maybe a motion piece to go with it, now there's sort of a need for something new all the time.
Yeah. And it is really interesting from the side that I'm on, seeing where our calls come from, hearing people like you and the buyers or the creatives that we're working with on the brand side talk about what it is that they need. And they really are valuing content. And, they have a decent amount of money to spend. It's not years ago where everybody was trying to get something for nothing. They definitely, have some healthier budgets. However, I feel like they want so much for that money, and it's all about getting as much content as they can get. So while on one hand, the bottom line looks like a healthy bottom line, the other hand, they want so much for that. It's become a little bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Right. So then for the producers, we're always trying to figure out how to take whatever that budget is and create the most content that we can possibly create out of it, and it's trying to almost throw out some old assumptions in your mind of how a photo shoot is put together in some ways. And I think it's something that we're all challenged with. And I think that's the same whether you're in an agency setting, whether you're working directly for a brand as an independent producer, whether you're a production company putting something together. I think it's the same challenge that everyone has, and still wanting to have that really quality image that is going to differentiate your brand, Well,
talk to me a little bit about the differences between working with a brand directly on a project versus an agency, and why a brand might, and this is probably a second part to the question, but why a brand might want to bring that process in-house.
Yeah, I think that, having worked for agencies for, most of my adult career, I can honestly say that there's a lot of value in working with an agency because you're getting a collaboration of a lot of different minds coming into this picture. So you're getting first a strategist working on all the metrics, then you're getting, a creative team working together and collaborating and maybe coming up with several different ways of attacking the creative. And then you're getting, smart business minds working on the account side together. You're getting producers who are coordinating with all those people. You're getting, project managers. So you have support, you have a legal point of view. There's a lot of support and roles that get filled in those, agents in an agency world, which, if anything, I've come to appreciate more since I've gone out on my own. Since I have to wear more hats. So I think there's a huge value in all those things that I just said. I think the reasons for maybe wanting to go outside of that model are a lot of it is just based on speed. And wanting something faster. And of course, like any process that you go into, whether it's cooking or advertising, the more cooks in the kitchen, it can kind of slow things down. So I think that as far as I see it, one of the main reasons that brands are thinking about moving more work sometimes to their in-house capacity is they just want more control and they want to be able to do things really fast if they need to.
And what do you think about the creative process there? I think, years ago, conversations would happen that when a brand brought their advertising in-house, they were crazy because they were missing out on the creative thinking and the strategy and the partnership. I'm hearing brands and people I know who work there directly saying that that isn't an issue anymore. And because they're able to attract good talent. And are you finding the same thing?
I wouldn't say that it's not an issue, but sometimes I think the problem that's trying to be solved is different than what we were doing in the agency capacity. So if your creative problem that you're trying to solve is basically just shooting a ton of content rather than trying to, say, tell a story, or if you're just out there to create a lot of different images that loosely fit into your like overall brand feel, I see it as a really different animal. And I think that some of the things that, took a lot of time, resources, et cetera, when we were creating things in an agency setting, we were sometimes really telling a story, and that story, like if it's up on TV, there's a lot of eyeballs on it. And so therefore, you have to be really careful with every single prop that's in there and making sure that there's legal clearances for everything. And when you're just creating content that's only going to be up quickly and then pulled down, I think, there's the temptation to do things in a different way. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. You were very articulate in explaining that. Let's talk a little bit more about how photographers and directors get your attention. You have your own business, so you are not at a desk with an address where someone could send you something as easily. You're a little bit harder to find and track down. So how do you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on out there creatively, and so that you can choose the people that you want to work with or recommend for jobs?
That's a great point. I think I've sort of kept my finger on the pulse because I never really got out of it. I've even though I work for myself now rather than an agency, I still have hundreds of people that email me all, like, I don't want to say I get hundreds of emails a day, but I mean, I'm still barraged by the same groups of people, the reps, the photographers, the artists, the hair and makeup people. I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn. I joke around that I probably am LinkedIn with every single like wardrobe stylist in the US, but I think that it's this, it's different in the sense that when I was in the agency world, there was sort of a protocol where, the larger and smaller reps would come and meet with us, and maybe we would have like, lunch, or while we were looking at portfolios, or, iPads, or we would, do that over coffee. And so that part of it is maybe different, but I still do a ton of networking all the time. That's a lot of my business, is just meeting with people. And I'm meeting with CMOs. I'm meeting with, people that I worked with in all different capacities before. I have close relationships with, the people that own the stylist companies. And, so it's different. I have to kind of work harder to network as an individual than I did in an agency, because when you're at an agency, people just kind of come to you. So it's a different kind of pace, because, a lot of times I'm the one that's maybe reaching out. But as I said, a lot of people reach out to me if they hear that I've been doing interesting projects and working directly with brands. Then, I get a certain amount of people coming to me too, saying, we hear that you've been doing this. Is this something you'd be interested in doing for us?
You mentioned LinkedIn. Do you use LinkedIn? Obviously, you use it to stay connected to people, but are you finding interesting people on LinkedIn as well? Are you paying attention to what people are posting there?
I do look at LinkedIn, and I would say it's a huge mix. I have quite a few people that I'm, thousands of people that I'm linked in with. So I think that's good news and bad news, because the good news is a lot of those people are, really in the heart of the industry and doing exciting things. And then I think I have so many people that I'm linked in now with that. Sometimes when I look at my feed, some of it feels super relevant and some of it feels like ads and other things coming through almost the way it is on Facebook. But I do find it an interesting tool. And what I love about LinkedIn is that it's really business focused. People are really there to talk about their work. I will sometimes use it to find resources. Like if I have a project where I'm working with a little team and I need a strategist, for example, I'll put something up on LinkedIn, and the number of really great candidates that come through, I think it's a great recruiting tool if you're trying to gather resources. That's one of my favorite usages of that, particular site.
And how about Instagram?
It's so funny because one of my favorite story about Instagram is that my first carnival shoot that I did when I was at Arnold, actually, we did this very interesting casting, and we were casting for real people in the Boston area. And we had an amazing first cast. I think it was maybe 15 people that we brought. And the parents of the Instagram founders were part of that cast. And I remember sitting around at the time on the shoot, and they said, "Oh yeah, our son is developing this new app. It's called Instagram." And we said, "Oh, that's really nice. That's great." And of course it's become what it's become. And what's interesting, Heather, is that I am actually so incredibly private in my personal life that I'm really not on Instagram. And I'm on Facebook, but I hardly ever look at it. If I get an email that it's someone's birthday that I know, I try and go on and wish them a happy birthday. But I kind of have like a little bit of a line drawn in the sand between my work life that's totally socially media driven and, helping brands to do that. And then my personal life, I kind of keep a little bit off radar, and that's just my personality. So that's the answer to that.
Well, and I think going back to LinkedIn, I do think people have done a really good job of trying to keep LinkedIn, trying to be true to what LinkedIn is about and keep it work focused. So people like you who are very private and don't want to share socially on Instagram or Facebook could get the relevant content they're looking for in a LinkedIn.
Yeah. And, I think, and I definitely am wildly criticized for not being like a big Instagram person. A lot of reps and even, younger people that I know that are like up and coming photographers, will just give me a lot of shit about it and say, why don't you get involved in this? So, but I think that the good news is, my interest in the arts goes beyond advertising. So I also, I'm very active in kind of the contemporary arts and emerging arts scene too. I sit on the board of the List Museum, which is the contemporary museum at MIT. I'm also on the arts committee at Colby. I was a partner in an emerging art fund called Via Art Funds. So I feel like I'm always seeing new artists, new photographers. Some of them are more or less commercially driven, but that's, I kind of have other sources too for being, for feeling like there's a relevancy.
I don't feel like, I've always said one of the amazing things about our job and our industry is that we can kind of make our own rules a little bit. Right? We can reinvent things. We can innovate. So I feel like you don't have to find your photographers on Instagram. You don't have to be on Facebook. There are so many other ways to stay inspired and stay connected. And you've obviously found what works for you. So, all those people who give you a hard time about Instagram, I would just... Oh, well,
they do it in a joking way. They do it in a very, very, very joking, like, I love you and I'm giving you a hard time way, not in a serious way.
Well, can we talk a little bit about getting jobs approved from your point of view? I know that we've touched on the fact that you're working with a lot more brands directly now. When I'm working with an ad agency, we present the estimate to the agency, they go through cost consultants, then it goes to the client directly, then they probably have people they have to go through. There's a lot more than just hitting send on an estimate and hoping it gets approved. Does that process differ any on your side if you're working directly with a brand?
I think it really depends on the individual company and brand. I think that, that's one that I think the process is so driven by who they are as a company. There's some companies that I've worked with who are, have incredibly high standards of secrecy around, like there are pharmaceutical companies that, you have to sign 1 million NDAs and they're very secretive about their product and, everything's really tightened down. And then, when it comes to getting the estimate signed, that's actually not that hard. It just depends. I think it's so idiosyncratic. And I think that, it depends who you're working with and kind of where you are in the process. So that maybe that's not a very good answer, but I think it really does differ company to company.
And that makes sense. That totally makes sense. What about treatments? Do you find that when you work with brands directly, they like to see treatments from photographers?
Yes. I mean, I think that in terms of photography, it's almost so standard now to expect a treatment. It used to be that treatments were more for directors. that was more their role. Of the assumption would be that they provide a treatment. But now I just feel like people are so used to seeing treatments from stills photographers too, that it's often, part and parcel. One thing that I will say about brands that I've noticed, and here again, I think this is a gross generalization and it depends completely on the company. But in my experience recently, I think when brands find a photographer that they really love, there is a certain sense of like, let's keep using this person for as long as possible, because sometimes it just takes so long to find the right person that's the right fit for that brand, that has the right look and feel, that understands where they want the brand to go, that's kind of a partner in that sometimes I think there's a little less turnover than when we were in the ad agency realm. And sometimes brands would use the same person a couple times, but there was also that, like, who else is out there, feeling about every project. So,
and I'm feeling that on our side a ton.
You notice that?
I am absolutely noticing that. I think, I've always said it's a lot harder to get new work than it is to get work out of a current client. And I really believe that there's so much opportunity with the brands direct, because the idea of what a creative partner is has evolved to the point where the photographer director, I almost don't even think those are the right words anymore sometimes,
right.
Have become more like a creative lead. Excuse me. And they've really lent themselves to this partnership that is beyond, let's partner on this one shoot. They're really digging deep into a brand and learning about all the attributes of that brand and their vision for the future. And I think the best partnerships are when the values of a photographer or director align with the values of a brand. Then that they're completely in sync. Mm-hmm. And it's those relationships that I think last the longest.
I think you're right, because, as I said, I just think sometimes it takes so long to find that right person that totally resonates, that when they do, they don't necessarily want to move on to the next thing. It's like, it's just a different mindset. Yeah.
I'm finding just the other day, I had I have a client that we've known for years. He shot with one of my photographers on a few different campaigns, and we've just always known him. And he merged his business with another more national business, and now they've created this like media company. And he called me the other day. He's like, I am tired of this idea of reinventing the wheel every time. Why do I have to go out and find a new partner, a new photographer or director every time? What I'd like to do is partner with you and your group. Would you be okay if I considered more of your photographers more often? It may mean that they would have to triple bid on a job. And I was like, 100%, yes, please. Like the idea that he's thinking that he's going to get the same experience, at least from a client service point of view, from everyone in our group. But what he's looking for individually are different visions and different values that he can align with his different brands. Why not do one-stop shopping? Because he can get a variety of different things from our group, and he recognized that. And I thought, wow, that is such a shift in the mindset for sure.
It's such a shift in the mindset. And it's, you know, it's almost like it's so great for your business or your kind of business where there's just an incredible trust in your roster and knowing that there's going to be consistency across the board. I mean, that's wonderful.
Well, and the other thing I'm finding is that there are production companies out there, although I don't think it's right to call them production companies. I tend to use that word and I'm lumping, media or content agencies, content creation agencies in that, because we get a lot of calls from them as well. We're getting calls from them saying that they want to partner with us and pitch clients together with us. So they don't see us as a vendor, they see us as a partner. And I think that speaks to a lot of the work that we've done over the last couple of years with the guys in our, the photographers in our group, getting to the root of what their values are and what they stand for as photographers and where their vision comes from, or as creatives, where their vision comes from, because it's becoming much easier to align them with brands that we never had an opportunity to do before.
That's just, it's so interesting, because I think that is another thing that I would say in this iteration of kind of the world of advertising. I think there's some unlikely partnerships that are springing up in terms of groups that weren't working together before as partners now are, so it's Absolutely. Some of those rules of who does what and how are really being broken down. And I think that's actually one of the more exciting things that's going on.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I think it's a real opportunity and it's very exciting, and it takes a lot of work to figure out how to make it work. And you can't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to partner with them, or oh, I'm going to reach out to them, or oh, I want to get more work from brands directly. You have to do a lot of work to be relevant for that opportunity. But I find it exciting, and it's a reason to stick around in this industry because it's so hard otherwise.
I know. Yes.
Well, this was an amazing conversation. I feel like we touched on so many things that are important and that are happening in our industry, not just the advertising industry, but the photography industry as well. And it's so nice to reconnect with you. And I just love that we have this Rhode Island connection that we've never known after all these years. So
I love it too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Heather. It was really fun to talk to you. And I always appreciate your ideas and your wisdom when it comes to our industry.
Oh, thank you. Well, next time I'm in Boston visiting my daughter, I'll come say hi.
I hope you do.
Thanks for listening. In an industry where the rules are always changing, it's helpful to hear from those on the front line. Heather Elder is the visionary behind notesfromarepsjournal.com. Visit her website for industry updates, stunning photography and video, and the artist behind the work.